All right, let's talk about the other issue, which is the one that you raised, I guess, a week and a half ago, which is whether this whole procedure, this whole trial is constitutional. You offered a motion contending it is not because you said a former president, a president who has left office, cannot be the subject of a Senate trial. The other side argues that under that standard, a president could abuse his power, quit at the last minute, and could not be held accountable by the Senate for, obviously, if it's a legal crime, he could be, but for a political crime, the Senate would be unable to touch him under your standard.
I think that argument ignores the fact that, yes, the president can be prosecuted. And if they think he incited a riot or an insurrection, which is such an overstatement and such a conclusion without any sort of presentation of evidence, all the left-wing media just concludes it. But the thing is yes, they can take him to court. They can take him to trial and do it. I think he has suffered under public opinion. His numbers are greatly reduced. And so I think there's all kinds of punishment. But we have to look, we've had a country for 250 years. And every other Congress thought it was unwise to keep, going after an ex-president. Constitutional scholars like Professor Wallace have said that the Constitution says you impeach and disqualify. If the person isn't there to impeach, you can't do either one of them. And so there are constitutional experts that say
Senator Paul,
also before my colleagues.
Senator Paul, that's not quite true. If I may, in 1876. The then Secretary of War, William Belknap, serving under Ulysses S. Grant, was about to be impeached for accepting bribes. He raced to the White House and resigned, but the House impeached him anyway, and the Senate decided that it had the authority to try him, and it did try him, and although a majority sought to remove him to convict him, they didn't get the 2/3. But isn't that the 1876 case of William Belknap a solid precedent?
No, because we've never impeached a president because we always thought it would destroy and tear up the country and divide us further. The thing is when you look at impeaching the president, the Constitution has some very specific requirements. It says when the president is impeached, the Chief Justice shall preside. And to me, this is one of the shocking things when we showed up and we found out that, yes, Chuck Schumer had called Justice Roberts, and this hasn't been reported widely, but he did. And Justice Roberts said, heck no, I'm not coming across the street because you're not impeaching the president. This was a strong signal to all of us that this was going to be a partisan hearing with a Democrat in the chair who's already voted for impeachment. You think we're going to get any fair rulings out of a Democrat that's already expressed favor for impeaching him previously and is going to vote this time to impeach him? So it is a farce. It is unconstitutional, but more than anything, it's unwise and going to divide the country. If Biden thinks he really, if he really meant anything about that unity and he really wanted to be a statesman, you know what he would have done? He would have come out and told his party, enough's enough, let's move on. We won the election and let's move on with our agenda. But instead, they can't let go of President Trump and they're going to keep kicking and kicking and kicking. But to the rest of the country and to most of the Republicans, it looks like bitter rancor that they can't get the election, they can't get over the election.
If you're wondering why Rand Paul and the rest of these Senate Republicans are now claiming that Trump's trial in the Senate is unconstitutional, it's because they can't argue on the merits. And so now they're going all in on process. Forget that Trump incited an insurrection. Forget that he peddled a lie that the election was stolen. Forget that he refused to abide by the peaceful transfer of power. Forget that his actions led to the deaths of multiple supporters and a police officer, not to mention assassination attempts on his own vice president. The Republican Party isn't interested in any of that. What they're concerned with is process. Now, Chris Wallace brings up the fact that by Rand Paul's own logic, no president can be impeached at the end of his term, and so in theory, he can do whatever he wants without fear of punishment. And this is supposed to be the party of law and order, handing the president carte blanche to do whatever he wants at the end of his term, and then just dodging by throwing it over to the criminal justice system? The fact is that despite how inconvenient it may be for Rand Paul, our government has a system of checks and balances. The legislative branch acts as a check to the executive branch, and it does so precisely with the tool of impeachment. That tool doesn't just go away because it's nearing the end of a president's term, just like the legislative branch's responsibilities don't go away either. And any effort by Rand Paul to pretend that they do is a testament to his cowardice, not the Constitution. And look, that's not to say that this issue shouldn't also be litigated through the criminal justice system, but that doesn't mean that Congress gets to shirk its responsibilities all because they're too scared to hold their deity accountable. The Constitution doesn't only work against Democrats. If a president commits high crimes and misdemeanors, which is the most generous way to describe inciting an actual insurrection at the United States Capitol, then Rand Paul and the rest of his caucus need to abide by the oaths that they swore and hold him accountable. And yes, even though Donald Trump is a Republican, because something tells me that if Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden did the exact same thing, Rand Paul would go hoarse screaming for impeachment and conviction. But suddenly, because it's Trump, well, suddenly there are some very serious process concerns that take priority here. Got it. Now, Chris Wallace even brings up the fact that in 1876, William Belknap was not only impeached after he left office, but he was even tried after he left office by the Senate. And to that, Rand Paul says that nope, that's different because it wasn't a president. The guy is literally just making up rules as he goes. So you can impeach and convict a cabinet member after he leaves office, but not a president, even though the exact same rules apply as far as the Constitution goes? And while this is utter BS, it should come as no surprise considering this is the same Republican Party that decided that Obama couldn't nominate a Supreme Court justice in the final year of his term, and yet Trump could nominate one with only weeks to go until the election. And when pressed on that, Republicans claim that it was because the Senate was of a different party than the president, and so clearly the situations are different. It is nothing more than reverse engineering excuses to serve as cover for their partisan hackery, and everyone can see it. But here's the worst faith excuse of all. Rand Paul complains that with Senator Leahy presiding over the trial, that because he's a Democrat, there won't be any fair rulings. Only, there are no rulings passed down from the person presiding over the trial. Senator Leahy's role is perfunctory. He doesn't hand down any rulings. The decision is made by the senators, including Rand Paul. So if anything, the guy who's accusing the presiding officer of being too partisan is himself proving that he's the one who's too partisan to sit for this trial. But finally, we of course get the argument that such a trial is going to divide the country. Right. Holding someone accountable for inciting an insurrection that left several people dead is the divisive part. Not the incitement of insurrection itself, but the punishment is the bad part. Somewhere along the line, someone told these Republicans that unity meant that they could avoid responsibility for criminal behavior. Biden ran on uniting the people of this country, which he's doing by passing a desperately needed COVID relief package, immigration reform, climate change action, and civil rights legislation. That is how you unite the country, not by letting a criminal walk free because he's got an R next to his name. So Rand Paul can throw out every tenuous excuse he could cook up, but the point here is clear. The guy is too much of a partisan hack to be able to pry his lips off of his golf buddy's ass and actually hold him accountable. You and I both know that if it was a Democrat, Rand Paul would be falling over himself to seek punishment. But now, since Trump's a Republican, well, suddenly he's got some pretty serious concerns over process. Concerns, by the way, that buckle the second they're put under a microscope. All that Rand Paul is doing here is proving that he is perfectly willing to hide behind the Constitution while refusing to actually defend it. While you're here, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I take a deep dive into the top stories of the week, and I also interview major players in the world of politics, like Kamala Harris, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Katie Porter, Al Franken, Cory Booker, Jamie Harrison, Mary Trump, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.